Okay. So we're almost done. So let me just say a little bit about where I think the future is going. I think we'll continue to see the introduction of new item types. So as the computer platforms become more and more sophisticated, they'll be able to handle a much richer kind of item. This is true for the BQ as well as for the cognitive items. I think you'll continue to see changes in the response modes in the BQ. You'll see new item types. I'm not allowed to show you any of the new PISA items yet because they're all still secure. I think you'll see more and more move toward automated scoring. Automated scoring now can handle a much wider range of item types, particularly in scientific inquiry. You can capture a lot of what the student does and score it automatically. That will improve measurement. There are computational linguists all over who are working on automated scoring of speech, automated scoring of writing, not just the structure of writing, but also the content of writing. ETS now uses those linguistic models for second scores. I think it won't be too long before the sophistication of that increases to where it will start to score. We use them all. We use automated scoring for all the practice tests. So I think automated scoring just will continue to take on importance. We're working with a linguist in PIAC to see if you can apply models across languages so you don't have to develop separate scoring guides for every language. She was borrowing bioinformatics strategies, the way they look at sequencing of genes to see whether or not that can play out in this kind of a context, and found some promising results. So I think that's sort of a burgeoning area, and that will continue to grow in importance in research. One of the things we've been talking to the OECD about is having more flexible use of language. What we've noticed in PIAC is all European countries are becoming more diverse. Immigration is having a bigger impact on most countries. In the US, it's been going that way for a long time. Yet we continue to test in very narrow languages, particularly with the BQ. The BQ is critical for the population models that are part of the methodology. One possibility is to allow the BQ to be in every language of the assessment, because the person can just click on a button and choose the language that they want. Even if the interviewer can't, you can have synthesized speech, can deliver the background question in the language. So you can do a lot of things now with languages on the computer that you could never do in a paper and pencil environment. There's also a lot of interest in what they call log file data. So when you collect data on a computer, the computer captures every mouse click, every movement, and timing information, and it creates this huge log file. But the OECD has yet to say, well, we want to do something with the log file. But we have researchers calling us all the time saying we'd like to harvest that log file and use it for research. You could look at strategies, you could look at paths, you could look at timing data, but there are no existing software programs that will automatically extract it because there aren't a lot of theories about what's important, right? So you've got all of this information, all this data, but no one has good theories about how to create variables from that data and create information from that data. So I think that's going to become a really important area of research because, as I said to you, we've taken the timing data out of PIAC, and we can show that there are these two very distinct groups when you look at scatter plots of time, where less than 5 seconds you get a group of people who really didn't even take the item, and then more than 5 seconds people took it. So we're now using timing data to better distinguish the omits and not reached, which goes into the psychometric model. So they believe that they've been able to reduce measurement error just by harvesting and applying the timing data to the psychometric models. That doesn't begin to get at all the process data that also exists in there. So my prediction is this is going to become a big area of research for psychologists and others. And I think because we'll be able to harvest more information, the psychometricians are going to have to develop better models because all the IRT models are based on right-wrong or polytomous scoring. but they don't take into account any of the process or strategy information. Once that information becomes available, the psychometric models will have to catch up. They're going to have to become richer. They're going to have to be able to deal with these more complex kinds of models. And then I think we'll start to see more what I would call derivative products. We already have PISA for Schools as a derivative product. There's this PIAC Online that's going to come available at the end of the year. I think there'll be more and more effort to try to connect what's being measured in these assessments to sort of diagnostic kinds of information. There are psychometricians working on diagnostic models, I think, with the process information. So I think you'll start to see things being developed from these large-scale surveys that get tied back to them. So let me just kind of summarize what I've been saying for however long I've been talking. I think the large-scale international assessments will continue to grow in importance, partly because I think as the world becomes flatter, in the words of Tom Friedman, we become more connected in ways we never really thought about. I think skills, education and skills are the common denominator. I think it's no longer enough to just look within a country to look at the distribution of education or skills. We're going to start to look more and more across countries. So I think these international surveys and the fact that they provide direct assessments of skills and connect skills to background data make them unique and of great interest to more and more policymakers. We have more and more people interested now. We get economists now asking to see the data, asking to come to conferences, sociologists, psychologists, educational researchers, plus a whole range of policymakers. So I think these surveys now appeal to a wider range of stakeholders, and that will continue to grow. I think computer-based assessments have been proved to be feasible within countries, and they're going to become the standard for development and delivery for the three reasons there. One, they better reflect what it is people do, and so they have a face validity to them. They look and feel right. That's what people seem to be more engaged with them. They add to the efficiency and the quality of data. In PIAC, we saw a higher percentage of people with complete data than we've ever seen in any paper-based assessment. The IEA, who did the processing of the data, told us the data they got was much cleaner. They spent much less time cleaning national data files because they get exported and put into an international record layout. So the time that it takes to turn around data is greatly reduced. The statisticians and psychometricians spend less time cleaning the data. The quality of the data is better. If you do automated scoring, it's another place where you improve. So just the efficiency and quality and quantity of the data, I think, will save countries money and will improve the quality of these surveys. And I think the innovation will just broaden what we're able to measure and what we're able to report. So I think we're seeing, remember I started this sort of conversation by telling you that in the beginning it was like one phase that they were using sort of old classical test theory, then IRT got introduced. And I think now computers are going to change yet again the trajectory of large-scale surveys. So in some sense you could think of this as kind of the third phase in the growth and development. And so you can look at this as an exciting time in your lives because you are participants in this change and innovation, which I think is really kind of remarkable what we're seeing now and what we're able to do. So thank you very much for your time and attention, and I'll try to address any questions you might have. So who wants to go first? You can't leave till 11:30, so you either have to sit here quietly or ask questions.
Can you go to the second or third slide?
From the beginning or the end?
From the beginning.
You're really putting the pressure on.
Okay. The next one.
Next one back? This one?
Yes. No.
This one?
No, before.
This one?
No.
This is the first one.
One more.
This is the beginning.
This
Unless
is
you want this one.
No, then let's go.
So can you tell me the content?
Yes, it's about opinions that they said they were looking for a more real data, no opinions.
Oh.
Yes,
one?
not being satisfied with assertions
Yeah.
or self-reports. Okay, I would like to ask you, what do you think about this kind of questions and analysis that are usually made in PISA that says students who attend the schools in which their principals said that the opinion of the teachers is good or bad, and then PISA assign a score for a group of students that the only relation of the performance is with one response of their principal that is an opinion about the opinion of others. So I'm not sure if we in some cases are developing a very fine technology, but we don't have, as the famous sentence says, with no data you have just an opinion. But with some data, we have data about a lot of opinions. Okay, what do you think about this kind of...
So I think you've already answered your question, but look, I mean, I think that kind of data has a lot of measurement error and probably a lot of bias, because you have no evidence that principals across schools within a country or even across countries are answering that question in the same way. They're interpreting it in the same way. I think it sort of raises some interesting questions that could be addressed through more systematic research. So I think studies like PISA, and PISA is certainly not the only one that asks for opinions, I think you have to be careful about overusing and overinterpreting data unless you have a fair amount of evidence that those items are reliable, valid, and comparable. So for me, background questions need to have those three criteria. You need to show that the item is reliable. Typically, one item responses or one item scales are much less reliable than 5 or 10 item scale. You have to look at their validity in terms of how they relate to things that are of interest to you and whether they relate in a predictable way. And third criteria is they have to be comparable. So you have to be sure that both within a country and across countries that those items are measuring the same thing. Unless you can demonstrate those three things, I always start off as a skeptic. So, I don't know enough about that literature. I'm not, my expertise is not in that area, so I don't know whether that question comes from sound research and has some validity in other contexts, and it was drawn from there and put into PISA. I also don't know whether that question has the reliability, validity, and comparability. I just don't know. I mean, I think it's safe to say that you should be suspicious. You should worry about whether or not people are overinterpreting what the results say. And I would say that anybody who's really interested in that area ought to do secondary research to either support or refute about whether or not that's a valid question and a comparable question across cultures and across countries. So I think you already have your opinion. I probably tend to support your opinion, but I think these studies, you can always misuse data, but I think they point to issues that could be the basis of dissertations and research and funding within and across countries. And I think that is something PISA and all large-scale assessments, not just PISA, they ought to do more. They ought to take a part of the funding and they ought to invest it in systematic research around item types and about the validity of certain item types, particularly in the background questionnaire. They ought to use it to look at new constructs. So there's a lot you could do, I think, with a little bit more funding that I think would address the kinds of issues you're raising.